The precision of procedure and how you go about your decision making process as an organizational leader often sets the tone of your entire organizational culture. That's precisely why my friends at Deloitte and the Pew Research Center did a deep dive in examining why and how organizational leaders make decisions under pressure. They found while it remains critical to approximately 97% of company executives, only 47% admit that they believe that their culture at work is currently resilient. And only approximately 18% of leaders scored high when surveyed about their ability to manage their stress tolerance. Meanwhile, while 67% of leaders admit they make critical and significant decisions under a significant time pressure, only 23% of executives say that they have systems in place to do it effectively. And finally, more than 97% of executives believe in the importance of exhibiting business resilience when making decisions, even if they go good or bad. This is all great information for my friend Ed Howard to consume. He's the founder of One Breath Leadership, a new human-centered leadership framework combining neuroscience, psychology, artificial intelligence, and 3 decades of Zen training. Before this latest venture, Howard spent more than 20 years as a regional head of compliance in global investment banking, where he saw firsthand how burnout, overwhelm, and cognitive overload were affecting organizational leaders. And now today, he teaches critical tools for clarity, resilience, and peak decision making in the age of AI. He's also the author of the upcoming book, One Breath Leadership. He also assists leaders in applying ancient wisdom coupled with modern science in order to perform at their best. And he joined me this week to tell me more. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. I started my conversation with Howard by asking him why resilience in leadership and providing organizational leaders with the clarity to make precise decisions is important to him and why he considers it his life's work.
So yeah, why do I love what I do? Well, I guess it's because it's the culmination of like 30 years of my life. Really, I became interested in Zen back in kind of 96, 97 when I was living in Japan after university. And just continue to be fascinated by its kind of history and teachings and so on, and the kind of role it plays in Asian culture it started out in India and then moved to China and then to, Vietnam and Korea and Japan where I encountered it. And then since I've been on that journey, I've come into contact with Zen masters in the US and in the UK, and so that was kind of just a really something that I had a real deep interest in. But the reason I came back from Japan was I promised my dad that I would study the law when I left university, and although I only planned to go to Japan for a year, I ended up going for 5 years. And then I came back and I did a master's in Japanese. And then I finally committed to what I said I was going to do, which was to start studying the law. But I didn't end up becoming a lawyer. I ended up falling into the world of banking and finance in legal and compliance departments. So I started out at Lehman Brothers in London in I think around about 2004, and then I've had a kind of 20-year career since then, which brought me to Singapore about almost 10 years ago, so in 2016. And then after a few years working here, I kind of felt like it was time to do something else, and that was when I began kind of thinking about what tools and techniques that I learned in those 30 years of practice would be useful in a kind of business setting or a leadership or corporate setting, because I tried things during my career that had worked quite a lot that hadn't worked for whatever reason, and so I was looking at a way to bring the good stuff to people, in terms of a technique or techniques that they could try, in terms of frameworks that they could use, in terms of how their own minds were working and how they were problem solving on a kind of minute by minute or hour by hour basis in a kind of high pressure, stressful environment. So, and I also think when you get a bit older, you start to think more about how you can help the next generation that's coming up. Not make the mistakes that you made. So yeah, it's a combination of all those things really that have led me to where I am now. And I'm just really enjoying it probably more than I've ever enjoyed a job, because it's kind of coming from a deep place in me, and it's using all my experience and so on. So I think when you step into that kind of flow, it doesn't seem like work. It just feels like you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and I think that's why I'm enjoying it so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted your opinion on human centered leadership because I know that the framework that you currently help people through is sort of rooted in that, my friend. So let's talk about the importance of human centered leadership and how it can help executives really thrive in their leadership styles. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Um, especially in a kind of era of AI and the use of technology and so on. These are all useful tools, but at the end of the day, what really drives drives me in terms of work is that human aspect and the relationship aspect of work, and it's inescapable, really. I think you can get so far without building skills or building emotional intelligence or kind of a human friendly approach, but the real leaders that I admired when I was working and in kind of a wider sense, have always had that kind of human touch. So, I think it's the most important thing. And I think especially as AI comes in and takes over, a lot of the sort of data crunching and those kind of aspects of what people have done day to day in the last, you know, 5 or 6 decades in terms of work. Where people are really going to shine is their relationships with other people, their ability to have presence. When they walk in a room, whether it's with the people that work for them or with their bosses or with clients or whatever. So yeah, I think it's a really important part of what I talk about, and it's something that, especially as things are progressing, that people can't afford to ignore, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned your time in investment banking, and you really saw the toll that burnout and not having the appropriate psychological safety took on your workforce. So talk to me about that time in your life and the realization you came to when it came to realizing the importance of managing burnout and coming up with the stress relievers needed to succeed in the corporate space. My friend, what are your thoughts on burnout, resilience, and effective leadership, my friend?
Yeah. So, I mean, I learned that even though I'd got this kind of meditation practice that I done for years, and did during my time at in the investment banks, it didn't stop burnout from kind of taking control. And it was only really when I stepped up away for a time that I started to put the pieces together in terms of how one thing could complement the other. And so I talk about this in the book that is coming out later this month on the 24th of March. But in both in neuroscience now and in the old kind of Zen teachings, and I think it's there in some of the old yoga teachings as well, going back, thousands of years BC. So this isn't new, but the way our brains operate as human beings, according to this framework, is we have this thing called our ordinary mind, and that or the dual mind, and that tends to be the thing that we use for making decisions. It's the things that that make us have preferences over one thing or another. It's like the difference between what's correct and not correct, and what's good and bad. And the way that we're educated in the West, and certainly the way that most people operate in kind of a work environment and a corporate environment, is heavily reliant on that particular type of mind. And it's great for doing all those things, for making decisions, for analyzing data, for deciding what you like and you don't like. But it also, if used too much, if you sit in that kind of mind all the time, which most of us do, it causes ideas to loop. It causes kind of noise and cognitive dissonance, and the outcome of that, or the slow creep of that, is kind of greater stress. Excuse me. Greater stress, increased anxiety, poor sleep, and if you let it really run riot with you, it could cause things like depression and other mental health issues. But there are solutions to that, and the solution in those old texts are these other forms of mind called the non-dual, which is basically where you pause and allow yourself to be in a moment. So you essentially slowing the mind down and giving it space to see what arises naturally rather than forcing a particular solution or a particular idea. And I think good listeners are, tend to be more adept at being in that kind of mindset. And then the third mindset that I talk about is known as the transcendent, and that's the kind of mindset where you combine your kind of dual and non-dual together, and you bring together both your sort of data set mind or your dual mind and then your non-dual mind, which is allowing the space for the solution or the right action to arise naturally. And most of us have felt that at some time or another. I don't know, people that do sports talk about the mind dropping away and becoming one with the ball, or one with the racket, or whatever it is they're using. Surgeons talk about it in terms of using their hands and allowing the hands to lead the process rather than thinking analytically about everything. So I sometimes jokingly refer to the scene in Star Wars where Luke Skywalker's coming into the Death Star and he's got his targeting computer on, and he's targeting, and he hears this voice that says, use the Force, and he turns his targeting computer off and just allows his natural ability to shoot the shot. And so really, One Breath leadership is about helping people, first of all, understand that framework and what it is and what it does, and then giving them the techniques to drop into that. And the main one is really, really simple. It's just a breath in through the nose for a count of 6, and instead of just breathing into your lungs, you take it all the way down into your belly, like 2 fingers below your belly button, and then you follow that breath back up again with your mind. And so what that does in essentially 12 seconds, or if you're smaller, 10 seconds or 8 seconds, is it just puts the handbrake on that thinking mind, that dual mind that's always kind of scheming and thinking and taking in data, and it allows your nervous system to calm down. It will slow the production of stress hormones like cortisol. It introduces diaphragmatic breathing, which is breathing with your stomach rather than with the upper part of your lungs. And so with those, this space opens up for people. And as a result of that, they're less reactive, they make less emotional decisions, they make less mistakes, and they make better decisions as a result of that. So that's a really simplified version, but it is basically quite a simple thing to do, and it's slightly different from maybe what people have done with breath work or what people have done with mindfulness programs, because you can lock into it in the moment, in the office, before you do a pitch, before you go in and talk to your boss, before you go and talk to a client, before you speak to a member of your team that normally, drives you crazy or what have you. And everybody that's worked in an office has usually got one of those. So yeah, that's it really, very briefly. And the book goes into all of the science behind that, as well as the kind of historical background from a Zen perspective as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that with me, Ed. And I'm curious to ask you about, the idea of cognitive clarity that you've just finished outlining for us. And I wanted to ask the idea or concept behind cognitive clarity and the importance do you think it should hold in the mind of executives when making decisions about organizational culture and the importance of infusing inclusion in that culture, my friend. Fred, how does cognitive clarity also help us to have an inclusive mindset, in your opinion? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
So the really direct answer to that is that when you enter that mindset of either observation or clarity or the transcendent mindset of action with clarity, your ego drops out of the way, and you know obviously ego is a sort of Western psychological term, but it's probably the best way to explain it for people to understand it. But what I mean by ego really is a lot, if not all, of the conditioning that all of us have in the moments leading up to whatever decision we're making, or whatever organizational change we're about to bring about, and that really is it can be very positive depending on the situation, but it can also be quite negative as well. So if physiologically you're in a stressed situation, so your stomach and chest are tight, your neck's tight, your mind's spinning, you're simply not going to make the same kind of decision that you are, coming from a clear mindset. And neuroscience breaks this down in terms of the different brain waves and so on. But I think you don't necessarily have to have the scientific knowledge to know that. So I can run through it really quickly. So like beta waves are the ones that when you're working on goal orientated tasks, such as like thinking about something or planning something, and they have kind of a very focused awareness and concentration. But if you go into essentially an early meditative state, that's when the alpha brainwaves start to take over. And what they do is calm the nervous system. They'll lower your blood pressure and your heart rate. That in turn lowers stress hormones. And then you get these kind of openings into having a broader concentration or awareness. And as that concentration or awareness broadens, you tend to see more options. You tend to not be acting from a selfish place or a place of ego or stress or fear, and you're much more in tune with the people in the room, the organization, what's better, what might be a better decision for the company. So those are that's the basic idea. But what scientists have also recently discovered is that you can kind of stack that one breath or that one moment of awareness during the day. So if you regularly tap into it or lock into it, you kind of build your muscle for clarity and calmness, and that's the same thing that Tibetan monks or Zen monks get from long periods of meditation, and people with mindfulness, training can also become, much. They can build that muscle much more. But because in the one breath method, you're doing it kind of in the heat of the moment. You're already kind of teaching yourself to switch from a high pressure situation or a tense situation or a high stress situation, and so your body and your mind will get used to that in the workplace and in that environment, rather than just sitting quietly meditating somewhere, or doing some kind of mindfulness training. So that's the kind of main difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that we share a mutual synergy for our love of sports, my friend. I know that you say that you're a football man, my friend, and you love, the European soccer or version of football. And I know that your dad was a big influence in that, my friend. So talk about your love of sports, my friend, and how it's influenced your life.
Um, yeah, I mean, as a small kid, my dad was always interested in football and boxing. My grandfather and my grandfather's brothers had all boxed competitively, and I can remember my dad getting me up in the middle of the night to watch one of Ali's late fights in the sort of late 70s, early 80s. And so, we were always around that. In terms of football, I saw this player called Kenny Dalglish, who played for Liverpool in the 70s and then went on to manage Liverpool in the 80s. He was a magician with his feet and the way he played. And so that kicked off my love of football. And then British culture, English culture, we're kind of surrounded by sports too. So I think it becomes a part of your identity, which football team you support and follow. But then, as I've got older, I've realised how much sports teach you about kind of fairness and competition, about being a good winner and being a good loser. And then really when I moved to Japan, I started, it's not a sport per se, but I started training in martial arts there, and that too, was a great love of mine in terms of while I was practicing out there, and I think that probably kick started my interest in breath. The importance of the breath and meditation. We used to do like a little short meditation at the start of every karate class. So there's kind of a journey of sorts there of going, starting off in sports and then becoming more interested in them, and then leaning towards meditation and so on. But I still enjoy working out now. I run and swim and lift weights and so on, and I find that is really good for it's really good for getting into that mindset where you're not thinking and worrying about things or stressing about things, and it just gives you that break. Similarly into the in the same way that breath work or meditation can do. So it's like a really important companion, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious to get your thoughts from these findings from LinkedIn that reported on the perceptions of leadership competence. And they say that it varies, my friend, and people who view the world from sort of a competitive mindset or framework are more likely to view egotistic leaders as competent, my friend, if you have a sense of competitiveness as a leader, so to speak. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on the idea of leaders needing to be competitive versus empathetic. What are your thoughts between those two as a distinction, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think that I think they both are important. I don't think there's anything wrong with competition. I think wanting, to do your best. I really think that the person you compete with the most is yourself, and that can drive you forward. It can be resilient. But at the same time, it can lead to resilience, and it can, it clearly leads to great success as well. But I think that it can have its. I think if you over rely on that particular state of mind, it can lead to some of the issues that we talked about earlier, because there'll always be another competitor. There'll always be the youngsters coming up on the inside. There'll always be another kind of somebody else in the business world that you have to go up against, and who may well be better than you or beat you. So I think it's important to have a balanced idea or competition about competitiveness, because if you have that balance, then you're not as attached to the outcome. And in my experience, often when you're not as attached to the outcome, it's often when you do your best work. It's often when you're at your most creative. It's certainly when you tend to get in the flow around work or decision making or creative ideas. So I think there's healthy competitiveness and there's unhealthy competitiveness, and it's really just about exploring that and finding where the boundaries are for you personally, and then leaning into that. And then I think the second part of your question was that about like EQ and emotional leadership. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
emotional leadership in terms of regulation and how it
regulation.
impacts performance. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So the answer is very similar. I think too much emotion, can lead to complications and difficulties. I think a complete lack of emotion is also the same. So again, it's about finding this balanced point. Having empathy is important. Having boundaries is also important. I think the one of the most difficult things for me was not taking everything as personally, and seeing things in terms of another sitting in another person's shoes and being able to to understand their point of view or where they were coming from, and if I didn't like it, finding a way to become comfortable with it, because when you're in that kind of dualistic day to day environment and work place, you are going to butt heads with people. You are going to disagree on things. People are going to infuriate you, make you frustrated, sometimes make you angry. So it's really all about having a balance to that, and that's really what the technique that the book is about, is all about, is briefly opening up those moments of space and calm, both mentally and physically, so that you become a less reactive leader and a more kind of thoughtful or balanced or calm leader. So that I think that's how I would answer that. It's a good question, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And what is your opinion on the advancement of AI and how we make sure that the advancement of AI doesn't overwhelm leaders and they still have that sense of human connection? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, I think it's really important. And I think we hear a lot about what AI can do or is going to be able to do in terms of, taking our jobs away and kind of running the world. And maybe that will come to be true, but there's lots of things that it can't do, and it can't walk into a room with presence and with confidence. It doesn't at this point have the sort of EQ or sincere EQ that you get from a fellow human being. It's also, it doesn't have the same depth of creativity that human beings have, and I don't think it ever will. It doesn't. I don't think it. However much data you put into an AI, there'll still be heights that it can't reach. So when I'm having conversations with people that are concerned about the rise of AI, I think those are the areas to focus on, because if you're focused and you're adept in those areas, there'll still be things for you to do going forward in the workplace, as things do inevitably change.
Yeah, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on building a thriving organizational culture and how infusing individuals with disabilities can be a competitive advantage for organizations. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
That's a really good question. I'm not I'm not sure if I am I'm completely qualified to answer it, but I'm sure that you would have very different perspectives about an awful lot of issues, a lot of issues that I maybe would never have thought about or been aware of. And I think as an organization, you can only gain by plugging into to different views, to a different way of seeing the world or seeing an organization or seeing a problem, and to fail to do that is really to weaken your organization and weaken your the way that you do business, and obviously that's a very broad answer, and it would depend completely on the kind of business you were in, and what kind of individual we were talking about. But I think it's important to have those to have those conversations, to kind of assimilate and understand those views, and then to build an organization that's inclusive of that, because I think I just think it gives an organization an edge that maybe it wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also curious to get your thoughts on these findings from Deloitte, my friend, that released a study last year that said only 23% of organizational support staff believe that their managers have the capacity or wherewithal to lead their organization through complex decision making. And they also said that they would be more confident in their managers to make decisions if they included, the employers they're in charge of leading in the decision making process, my friend. So, what do you think of those findings, and why do you think it's important to involve employees also in organizational decisions? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Um, so yeah, I would certainly agree with the data. I think a lot of this comes down to sort of traditional frameworks and historical frameworks. We tend to have these very hierarchical frameworks in banks or in big companies where you work your way up the ladder, and the higher up you get, the more kind of power or decision making ability you have. But that doesn't what that doesn't do very well is understand, the bottom of the pyramid in terms of how people are thinking there, and how people are feeling there. And so I think it's just about building organizations where all employees feel included, they feel like they get a say, and it's not just done via a questionnaire at the end of the year that disappears into the HR abyss, or the leadership abyss. It's kind of genuinely considered and thought about. So that's my very simple answer to that. I think we are seeing with Gen Z that they're not prepared to accept the kind of traditional hierarchies and demands that companies are putting on them, and I think that has in part caused the boom in kind of entrepreneurialism and startups and so on. I think it's caused, along with technology, people to kind of work remotely or work for themselves much more, because they're not prepared to. They don't want to take the deal that's being offered to them. So I think the companies that succeed over the next decade or two will be the ones that take that on board and listen, and maybe start to deconstruct old models of hierarchy, and come up with something that's a little bit more egalitarian and flat in terms of structure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got two questions left for you. And the first of these two questions is about stress impact and management, my friend, because research from the PR Newswire from last year also reported that 44% of large teams say that stress impacts morale at work, and 75% of lower employees also say that their boss's ability to manage stress affects their entire sort of mood when they come to work. And then finally, in the same report, leaders and new leaders say that when they first step into the job, they're 82% unprepared to deal with stress management and the changing winds of the job, my friend. So, talk to me about your thoughts on those findings and what do you think needs to be done to give leaders and those that they're in charge of leading better tools to manage their stress levels? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, I think this is what the mindfulness sort of movement has attempted to solve. I don't. I wouldn't discourage anyone from mindfulness practices. I think they can be useful, but I think it's human nature to maybe push themselves more into the work and to kind of being seen or doing well in a company than they are about looking after themselves or kind of turning their attention inward to their own sort of stress levels and leadership performance and so on. So so to add on top of that complexity, the conversations around stress and mental health, I think have been going on for a decade, maybe more in the US and North America and in the UK and Europe. In Asia, talking about stress or talking about mental health is still kind of a difficult conversation to have. So that there's cultural implications as well to having that conversation. So that's one of the reasons, that the work I do positions what I do as a performance tool rather than a well-being tool, because everybody wants to do their best at work, but as you say, they just may not necessarily have the awareness or the tools to do it. But when you pick the right tools, not only does your work get better and your performance, but your stress is lessened as well. And so by learning tools that you can use in real moments of pressure, by using it as micro interventions throughout the day, so you don't feel like you've got to meditate for 10 minutes in the morning and meditate for 10 minutes at night, that you can do it during your day and kind of build that kind of awareness and ability. People will find that things become more clear and more simple, and that will always be kind of complexity and sophistication. So my recommendation is people can learn to reset their nervous systems and bring the calmness and clarity back online in just a few seconds. And by practicing that regularly, it has so many positive effects. It reduces stress response. It causes you to have clearer thinking. It causes you to have to be more creative and have kind of a wider attention and awareness. Just gives you a better perspective throughout the day, and the knock-on effects of that is everybody that's around you benefits from that. So it's also about taking individual responsibility for kind of managing our own minds and managing our own reactions and working on that. as part of our kind of daily life, daily work life, and leadership training.
Yeah, absolutely. And my final question for you today has to do with your own individual, personal, and professional legacy, my friend, and how you want that to be defined.
How do I want it to be defined? I, I I think the simplest answer to this is to be somebody that people enjoyed being around, and that sounds very simple, but I think it's also very kind of deep and important too. And I haven't always managed that in the last 30 years, but I think as I've got older, it's become the thing that's most important to me. And so, I would like my legacy to be that people enjoyed working with me or talking to me or working on a goal with me. And hopefully that I helped other people achieve something similar or relax into something similar is probably a better way of putting it.
Yeah, absolutely. And my friend, if people want to get connected with you, what's the best way they can do that?
Sure, they can go to onebreathleadership.com. There's a contact form there. There's also a um, button in the top right hand corner that says free stuff on it, and there's a sample of the book in there, and there's a little audio clip of how to practice the method. There's also an audio summary of the book that will be coming out on the 24th of March. Excuse me. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. My name's Ed Howard. It's Kokoro Business Performance or One Breath Leadership. They can by all means connect with me there too.
Well, fabulous, my friend. I want to thank you for engaging in conversation with me today, all about leadership, breath work, and everything in between to help us become better organizational leaders, my friend. Your work in the space and time on my behalf is most appreciated, and I want to thank you for being here, my friend.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, it's a real pleasure. As I said earlier, when we were off mic, I was really looking forward to this one and to talking to you because I really admire the work that you're doing. So thanks so much for having me on.